Oh, good. Let's try to do the intro. Let's try to get it right.
Okay.
3,
2,
2, 1. Hey, nerd.
Hey, nerd.
God damn it.
I think that was closer than we've ever gotten. I don't know if it was accurate, but it was better than the past few times, because it sounded like we were doing it concurrently.
Maybe we should just edit it so it sounds like we're saying it at the same time.
I feel like the problem with that is that the repercussions are then everything after that would be slightly off.
That's true. Oh, okay. Well,
there's a give and a take, you know?
Yeah. So we don't forget until 8 minutes in. My name is Caroline. My pronouns are she, her, hers.
My name is Eli. My pronouns are they, them, theirs. We're ironing out this intro thing. It's very good.
We're slowly but surely getting much better at this as time goes on.
Yes.
By, episode 5 or 6, we're gonna have it down.
Yeah.
Hopefully. I'm not sure. Did we talk about what we're adding this week? Was that outro music, I think?
I think we were jokingly saying outro music. I don't know if we ever decided. But, you know, outro music makes sense. If we did intro music last week, then we should do outro music this week.
Yes.
Maybe.
Okay. Alright, so let's do outro music then, I guess.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, I think you're asking the Brendan question this time around.
I am asking. And the Brendan question this time is, in keeping with kind of the theme of today's episode, funny people doing funny things, if you were an SNL sketch, which one would you be? SNL has a lot of sketches. They've been on for 30-something years?
I think, since the 70s, so maybe approaching 50 at this point.
Maybe.
Who knows?
Well, you answer. I will look up how long SNL's been on.
Okay. Today I think I would be the, Wells for Boys, skit, just because it was raining outside today and I feel very, contemplative. That's kind of where I'm at. That's also just one of my favorite sketches, because it's just if you have a sensitive boy, here's a toy for that. That's just, a thing you look into and kind of sigh over. Arguably this could be achieved with just, a bucket. You could just get, you could, spray paint a Home Depot bucket silver and be like, go look at that, Johnny. But no, it's, a full toy. And I think that's very fun.
That is very fun. I don't think I've ever actually seen that sketch.
Oh, it's great.
As I said, there's a lot of SNL. I think I would be, or maybe it's just one that I really enjoy, but the Weekend Update where it's John Mulaney and Pete Davidson talking about The Mule for 5 minutes, and it's, the most... Because The Mule is objectively, a weird movie. When I saw the trailers, I was like, this is gonna be weird. I'm not gonna see it, but I'm gonna know that it's weird. But they talk about it, and it's very funny and very well written, and also highlights the fact that it is a weird movie, and they do weird things in it. But also, I just really appreciate Pete Davidson and John Mulaney as, people who are friends. So it's cool to watch them together.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a close second for that would be another Weekend Update sketch, but it's a Stefan sketch. And it's the Stefan sketch where John Mulaney is playing Stefan's lawyer.
Oh, yeah!
And so, he's dressed appropriately, but then he just talks like John Mulaney, and it's the best, cognitive dissonance, because he shouldn't sound like himself, but he does. Mm-hmm. And so you're like, wow, this is weird, but very funny.
Very fun. Neato. Do we have any funny anecdotes from this week? I mean, we just put out a second episode, which is, an achievement. And I believe we are now talking to an audience of 2 or 3, because I finally got my friend Ileana onto this. And they were like, I've, been listening to a lot of podcasts lately, and I was like, have you heard of this one that I'm doing right now? No, you haven't, because we didn't do any advertising, but here it is.
Yeah, have you heard of my podcast?
Yeah, so hi, Ileana. If you're listening, hopefully you are. I'll ask later.
I don't know, I guess my only weekly anecdote is I now have Pride Converse, which is super fun, except I didn't realize that I was getting, the thick-soled Converse, so I think I have, 1.5 inches of sole on these shoes, which is very different from normal Converse. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's my weekly update. That's a thing that happened.
Yeah. Are they the shoes with, the pride flag on the bottom, or is it the one with, they're on, the actual sides?
Both. There's a pride flag there's a rainbow on the bottom, a rainbow on both sides, and then the Converse little back stripe thing is also a rainbow. I could text you an image of these. I have an image of these. I will text it to you now. But yeah.
Put it in the episode notes for this week.
They're very rainbow-y, and I appreciate them because, sometimes you just gotta be wearing rainbows all over your feet, and that's just a thing that needs to happen.
It's quite the departure from the black Converse you normally wear.
Well, they're still black Converse. They're black Converse plus rainbows. I was like, I'm going to make these black and rainbow Converse, and I did that. And so now it's like, it's very much in line with my old stylistic Converse. But also,
very good.
Now I have rainbow Converse. So alphabet soup's gonna be fun.
Yeah! Nice. Okay, so I guess we should probably hop into this week's topic. Woo!
Yes, do a cartwheel off a cliff and then land on the topic of the week. Like a Looney Tunes sketch.
Yeah, a little bit. Who are we but Wile E. Coyotes chasing after the Roadrunner of life?
That's my life philosophy. I want to be Wile E. Coyote. Except maybe a little bit more successful.
Yeah, just don't look down.
Yeah. Learn from Wile E. Coyote. Don't look down, and never run full speed into an overpass because you never know when that's just gonna be a painting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there we go. That's our life advice from Wile E. Coyote. We're talking about comedy this week. This is our segue.
Yes.
This is our graceless segue.
We segue through Wile E. Coyote to comedy and comedians and funny people who do funny things.
Yeah. About as gracefully as Wile E. Coyote runs into a wall. So yeah. I mean, we're like starting off, I guess, with stand-up comedians, since that was Shelby's specific request.
Yes.
One particular stand-up comedian.
Yes.
So, yeah. Do we want to go through, like, other stand-up comedians we like and build up to John Mulaney, or, like, what's our plan?
I mean, I would say I think that we should probably start with John Mulaney because I know for sure that we both know who John Mulaney is and we both like him. I don't have much guarantee on any of the other stand-up comedians that I have, like, thought of that, I don't know. John Mulaney's kind of, like, a universal phenomenon now. I feel like a lot more people, like, a more widespread group knows who he is than knows a lot of, like, other young comedians in, like, the same genre of comedy. You know?
Yeah. Alright, so let's start with good old John Mulaney. I think I was introduced to him...
I'm sorry that you guys just got ear-raped by my coughing.
I was introduced to him, I think, in middle school, 8th grade-ish. Shortly after I learned about Bo Burnham, who I guess I'm also going to talk about later. Yeah! Eli just did, like, hand gesture.
I did the longhorn gesture, but make it not about UT.
I think it's like the rock and roll hand gesture thingy. Like, that thing. And yeah, I just ended up really liking him and just kind of watching his specials on Netflix. And how did you get introduced into John Mulaney, Eli? Because this is a thing I definitely don't know anything about.
Caroline's making a smug facial expression. Can I talk? No. But I got introduced to John Mulaney because I was staying over at Caroline's house one night, as you do when you're friends with people, and Caroline was just like, we should watch this comedy I think it was actually the morning when I was leaving at like 9 a.m., and so at 8 a.m. you were like, we should watch this comedy special. And we watched, I believe, the most recent one, which is Kid Gorgeous at Radio City.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Yes. The one where it's the horse in the hospital bit, which I believe is Kid Gorgeous at Radio City. So that's what we watched, and I was like, wow, this is a very funny man. And then I went home and proceeded to watch the other two of his comedy specials that are available on YouTube that same day. But I actually realized later that I had heard a John Mulaney bit before that, because I'd heard the, what song is it? The What's New Pussycat bit? I'd seen, I'd seen an animatic of that, and I'd seen an animatic of The One Thing You Can't Replace. So I had seen animatics of both of them, because that's like a thing that people do over comedy videos, but they never had his name attached to them, so I didn't know who it was. I was just like, oh, this is some... And I didn't know they were the same person. I was like, oh, these are just funny things that someone said, and other people were like, I can make a comic animation thing over it. Mm-hmm. But the first time I knew John Mulaney as like a person and as a performer was because Caroline introduced me to him. I think the summer between freshman and sophomore year.
That tracks, I think.
Yes.
We'll say that, and then...
We'll agree that was it.
Yeah, we'll agree on this point in history. And the reason that we're bringing him up is because our friend Shelby, our first listener, diehard fan, is also very into John Mulaney. I think... Oh god, I'm not even sure. Shelby, you'll have to text me later after this episode, but I think we talked about John Mulaney when we first met at, like, the freshman-sophomore pool party. Though that may have just been talking about Heather's. I can't remember.
The same pool party where I had a long discussion about chicken cannibalism. We were at very different levels of communication at that point.
Yeah, that level of communication being 0. I don't think we spoke.
No, I don't think we spoke at all.
No, because you were on, like, the adjacent part of the pool to me, to where I was, because I was on the long side and you were on the short side, and I was talking to, I think we all just, like, clustered off and talked to, like, 3 people max each, at that party. So, you know, good way to mingle, good way to get all the freshmen to know each other before high school started.
Yes. It was like, I remember, just, like, from memory, it was a lot of people, like, grouping up by middle school, because I think, like, the Lanier and, Meyerland, I guess, is the name. No one calls it that, but, like, kids, I remember they were close, and then it was just me and, the Persian kids, and then also, Iggy, because, of course.
Yeah, because of course.
Iggy was the person with which I had the chicken cannibalism conversation.
I kind of figured, yeah.
Yeah.
Shout out to Iggy. Or call out to Iggy, I guess. I don't know. Whichever one. I'm not sure if he's ever gonna listen to this, so who knows.
Who knows? We've gotten wildly off topic.
John Mulaney. Popular comedian that a lot of people in our friend group like, and frequently try to quote. I was, like, listening back to some of his older stuff. I was actually looking at his SNL, like, opening monologue from, like, the 3rd or 4th time he hosted. And he was talking about a quote that I relate to a lot, which is, like, all of our dads are studying for a big World War II quiz show that's never going to take place, and they're going to win $300,000 on Normandy trivia, because it's pretty much my dad in a nutshell. He just learns about World War II, drinks margaritas, and he's actually doing a virtual happy hour with his coworkers right now in the, like, weirdest Hawaiian shirt. It doesn't have, like, plants on it. It has, like, different cocktails on it. It's also a Hawaiian shirt on my normally very formal dad, so he's like... Yeah, anyway, there's a lot going on in my house.
It'd be like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think, it's very interesting. One of my favorite John Mulaney bits is, well, obviously the way John Mulaney talks about his dad is very funny, but the whole, in, The Comeback Kid, the whole Bill Clinton segment is great.
Yeah.
But especially when he's, like, first introducing it and he keeps, like, cutting away from himself, from his own narration to talk about, Han Solo actor movie, a different movie with the same actor. Harrison Ford. Yeah, he's talking about, like, a Harrison Ford movie. While he's trying to, like, get forward with his story, he keeps cutting out. And I can't do the bit, but I think, like, that's a very funny way of, like, I don't know, I watch a lot of comedian analyses on YouTube, and so I think, like, that's a very good way of making, even, like, that late in the show, humanizing yourself and making yourself feel, like, unprepared and kind of, like, loose or stream of consciousness-y to your audience is to, like, cut back and forth in your own narration with, like, other information.
Yeah. And I feel like John Mulaney is also kind of part of this, like, just group of white guys who teens on the internet really like, because they have, like, very weird, chaotic energy going on.
Yes.
Griffin McElroy, Brian David Gilbert, I'm trying to think. There's another one.
Bo
Probably like
Burnham.
Shane from Unsolved. Oh, wait, what did you say?
Mm-hmm. I think the four that you see compared are Griffin McElroy, Brian David Gilbert, John Mulaney, and Shane from Unsolved, which is like Farrell. There's like an alignment chart for the four of them that's like Farrell, Posh, and then I don't remember what the other axis is, but it's those four.
I think Anxiety and Gremlin, question mark? I don't know.
Maybe. That seems right.
So yeah, that's kind of where we're at. Those are also all people that I like. I've been rewatching BuzzFeed Unsolved, and it's very funny, because Shane's just, like, there having a great time, and Ryan's, like, absolutely shitting himself. At every single location. He's like, oh my god! And then Shane's like, oh, that moved, that's nice.
Yes. I think a good reversal on that dynamic is watching Puppet History, which is instead Shane trying to keep things on track and Ryan being the chaotic bastard who's like, no, I'm gonna inject my randomness into the situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Those boys are great.
Those boys are great. I think, yes. No, I do remember, for as far as like our relationship with John Mulaney, is that also, was it sophomore year or last year? But it was 1 year for your birthday, I got you like John Mulaney posters in reference to like, this is a thing that we talk about and kind of like solidified part of our friendship over. Yeah. I don't know. I think John Mulaney just is very much like, I think the thing that makes John Mulaney so likable is that he references some of the shows, he projects himself as someone who's never done anything in his life ever. Like, the way that he walks and talks is like, oh, this is a very, like, John Doe kind of everyman sort of person. And then he just has done crazy things and has had crazy things happen to him. And that makes for, like, a very good kind of natural comedic balance, I guess. Juxtaposition. Yeah. I've been out of school too long and I'm forgetting words.
Yeah. Those posters will get framed one day. At some point.
Good. Hopefully. I mean, all of my posters are just, like, shoved in random places, so, like, posters not getting hung up is completely understandable.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's kind of our thing with John Mulaney. He's a good dude, and, like, the way he talks is just great in general. He's just, like, he just sounds like he's constantly surprised, even when, like, this is something he's written out and, like, practiced a bunch, which is so fun. So, yeah, John Mulaney is a cool dude, who we quote quite a lot. For our D&D campaign, I have made clear that at some point I do want to turn into a horse while in a hospital, because I'm a druid and I can do that.
Yes. Also because your dad's a doctor.
Also because my dad is a doctor. Yes, so there are those two things going for me. So yeah. So I guess, like, who are some stand-up comedians that you liked, either pre-John Mulaney or post-John Mulaney, just other stand-up comedians you dig?
I mean, I've recently gone back and started rewatching James Acaster's 4-part... It's 4 different comedy specials, but they're all kind of tied together, and it's like a 4-part series on Netflix, which is... they're very good. And it's... I think, like, the thing that James Acaster does... And again, this is like a YouTube analysis thing that I saw, but it's very interesting, is that instead of how most comedians try and be, or they project this, like, aura of honesty and aura of, like, this is my real life and I'm telling you about real things that are actually happening to me onto their comedy, he fully does not do that. He makes up these, like, crazy backstories. Because in I believe it's called... I don't remember the name, but it's the Green episode, and if you, like, go look up James Acaster repertoire, you will see what I mean by the Green episode. He's wearing green, everything is green, it's very interesting. But in that, he straight up just pretends like he's an undercover cop who's undercover as a comedian, and James Acaster is his undercover persona. And it's very fun to see him and, like, the way that he structures his comedy specials. Because he does, like, some stuff with props, and then also he plays, like, other audio over it, and he gets into very existential questions while also complaining about, pret-a-manger and a weird banana lady, and then the fact that, like, some oven mitts are connected. He, like, talks about very mundane things in this very, like, extreme and quite comedic way, and I really just enjoy watching him because he has that same kind of feral, unhinged energy, while still seeming like a very well put together and rehearsed comedian.
Let's see, I was trying to throw my mind back to, like, when I really first, like, discovered stand-up comedy, and I think it was when my babysitter, Rachel, shout out to Rachel, showed us Rowan Atkinson's stuff on YouTube. And for those who don't know, Rowan Atkinson is the guy who plays Mr. Bean. He does talk, and he says quite funny things when he does, and those get recorded. And the bit that I think I saw the most was this one where he's the devil, so he's got, like, these little, like, plastic horns from, like, Party City and a little cape to match. And he's otherwise just in a suit strolling around this stage, and he's kind of directing, like, these imaginary crowds of sinners to different places. And I think the joke I remember the most is, liars, swindlers, and thieves, you're over there. Lawyers, you're with that group.
Very good.
Oh yeah, there's another part where he says, Christians, you're over here, and then, like, the audience kind of pauses, like, wait, huh? And he's like, yes, it turns out the Jews were right. Which is just, yeah, he's just a funny guy. He's just this funny British man saying funny things. And then after that, I think my brother got into Robin Williams, and I believe can recite most of that man's, discography back to you word for word, especially the part about being Episcopalian, because Episcopalians aren't really talked about a whole bunch, so when we do find comedy about ourselves, it's very fun to repeat. I've joked about being Catholic light before. That's kind of what that's Robin Williams right there. It's great. So yeah.
Ugh, the Catholics.
The Catholics.
The Catholics.
Yeah. I just kind of realized, like, neither of us are eligible for papacy, and that kind of makes me sad. Like, I didn't care about it before, but, like... oh, darn! Can't be Pope!
I like how that suggests that there's some, like, desire in one of us to become the Pope.
I mean, there wasn't before, but now I kind of wanna! Like, what do you mean I can't be Pope? I want to be Pope now. I'd be a great Pope. I'd be a chill Pope. I'd probably be a very bad one, but I'd be a cool one.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know if anyone can be, like, chill about religion and be the Pope. I feel like you have to be pretty religion heavy to get to that level in the Catholic Church.
I guess. Oh well.
I don't know.
There's been some shenaniganery with the popes back in ye olden days. There was one point where there were, like, 3 popes all at the same time because the position was horribly mismanaged.
Yes. But I'm sure none of those people were female or lesbian, so, you know. And they were all Catholic. Another thing that disqualifies
There's
us.
just, like, a lot of factors going into me not being able to be the Pope, and I'm a little bit upset that door's closed to me.
They've shut you out. They've said, I don't think so. I do not think so. It's really good on you for trying, but no. No, I've never had the desire to hold any sort of religious authority. Maybe because I don't respect religious authority, and so, like, it would be weird to be in that position. But it is what it is, you know? Speaking of respecting religious authority, we're gonna veer back onto the topic, because another comedian who I watched, like... So I watch a lot of, like, Comedy Central stuff on YouTube. I will just go down the rabbit hole, and it's like a thing that happens. But a while ago, I watched a couple of clips of Jabuki Young White, who's a Daily Show correspondent, but he also does stand-up comedy. Well, a Daily Show correspondent, and he also does stand-up comedy. And he I think he went to definitely Christian private school and probably Catholic private school, but he has a lot of very, like, funny jokes and funny, like, experiences in this, like, religious upbringing. And then also, he has this one bit where he's talking about, Jesus looking, like, the paintings of Jesus on the cross always looking, like, unreasonably attractive, which is very funny. And he's part of, like, a group of queer comedians who I watch, who I, like, get a lot of enjoyment out of, but I'm always down for people who are making fun of, like, Christianity and Christian education. because I also do that.
Yeah.
And so I feel like there's a certain level of camaraderie between the two things.
Like, I would be surprised if you went to a Christian school. I don't think that you've ever brought that up to me if you did.
I mean, I went to Christian preschool, but that's hardly Christian school. That's just like preschool, but you're kind of in a church.
Yeah.
And then but that was like from the ages of 2 to 3. And then I went to like a private preschool up through kindergarten, but then like 1st through 12th grade was going to be all public school. 'Cause, you know, public education is what it is, but I don't.
Yeah.
Private schools are expensive.
Yeah.
And I've heard some things about private school culture that make me be like, even if that was like an option for me, I would not want to take it.
Yeah. Yeah. I like making fun of religion and like Jesus and stuff, because it's very funny, because I have like a dad who is an Episcopalian and who like goes to church and shit. And my brother's an acolyte, I think mainly for like the stuff that comes with being an acolyte. Like he gets to like swing around the big thing of incense at like big ceremonies, which is apparently called a thurifer, which I keep insisting sounds like a Pokemon name.
Mm-hmm.
And then my mom is like, for a really long time, like as long as I can really remember, has just been hardcore atheist.
Yep.
So whenever I like even try to broach like a religious topic, like, hey, so wouldn't Satan be kind of sad about punishing all the sinners if he's just like punishing people like him? And she's like, that would be a problem if Satan were real, but he's not. So I'm like, can we not engage in no? Okay.
Can we not engage in it as a mythology at the very least?
Yeah, I'm like, can we not just discuss this a little bit, please? But yeah, I ran into a comedian kind of on that. I think it was from Comedy Central. It was Joel Kim Booster, and his bit about like growing up adopted Asian and in a very like fundamentalist Baptist Southern home, like in a town full of white people, and also being gay and all that. So that's like a fun experience. And it, I mean, I shouldn't relate to it as much as I did because I was homeschooled, but not religiously. But at some point he was like, so a side effect of being homeschooled, like a fun little perk of that is that I also don't know about states. And I was like, yep, that's about right. I don't think I ever formally learned the, like, months of the year. I just kind of figured it out, like, as I went along in middle school. I was like, oh, this is the first time this really matters. Like, I knew November was a thing. I just didn't really have a need to, like,
you just didn't, like, that use November.
Yeah.
That's really funny.
I knew November was, like, rolling around the corner, but I was like, yeah. It's just, it's a fun time being homeschooled.
Yes. I think, as far as the states go, I was supposed to learn all the states in elementary school, and then I didn't. Which is, like, the nature of things that you're supposed to learn in elementary school, is that there'll be, like, you learn this, and then you're like, yeah, okay, but it's kind of, like, optional. Which is why I don't remember the state song, but it is very funny. One of, like, the funny experiences with people who went to different elementary schools is that we all learned some version of, like, the state song, but, like, we all know completely different song tempos or rhythms, and so it's, like, we all have the same general information, but it's completely useless because you can't overlap it. Yeah. No, I think, I can't think of any other comedian. Well, I guess John Mulaney also makes fun of, like, the way in which church is conducted, but he's making fun of, like, Catholic high church, which I guess...
I recognize stuff in that as well. Episcopalians really do be like that.
But it's very interesting because, like, I grew up in a... I guess... This applies to any religion, but I know, like, it's especially with Christianity. I grew up in what could not be described as a high church because the Methodists aren't chill, but they're more chill than a lot of other Christian denominations. And I definitely grew up in, like, a very chill Methodist denomination because there were, like, maybe 30 people who attended my church regularly. And it was very, like, if there was a football game on, church would end early. Like, it was very much it was very chill. And so it's, like, it's very funny listening to comedians who grew up in, like, very, very religious, sects of Christianity. And just the fact that, like, that's ridiculous to me as someone who was also raised Christian. Like, if people who are ever wondering, like, are the Catholics really that ridiculous? Yes. All Christians make fun of Catholics because they are that ridiculous.
Yeah, Catholics are just so fucking, like...
The Catholics and the Baptists.
Yeah. Catholics, the Baptists, easy targets. Just very easy targets. But yeah, I did kind of, like, at one point ask my mom, like, hey, so our dean, who's, like, I guess... The Episcopalians have weird names for the clergymen, I have learned, by talking to other people who don't know what the fuck a dean is. The church boss.
Like your head pastor?
I guess? Sure, we'll call him that. Like, our old dean didn't used to, like, sing the psalms when he was, like, blessing shit. What's up with the new dean? And my mom was like, I think Barkley just likes to hear the sound of his own voice. So yeah, I mean, it's a good voice, he's a good singer, but it was just like, oh, it's kind of weird. But yeah, it's very, like, it is campy church, is what kind of the, like, high church is. It is just a lot of glittery fancy stuff. That's old.
Yes. It is old. And I think also, I guess on the subject of, like, the Catholic Church being using targets, John Mulaney's bit about the Catholic Church's reform being limited to changing the way that service is held is very funny. Well, I guess, like, we can say the Catholic Church is kind of, like, an open history of the priests being sexually predatory, especially towards young male altar boys, which is insanely problematic, and I think that John Mulaney not saying that, but definitely making reference to that throughout his specials is very good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Woo!
Woo! Religion!
Yay! Religion!
We got there again. I think we got there in our first episode, and we're here again.
How did we get there in our first episode? What happened there?
Well, we were talking about the beef people, and we were talking about, like, our moral beliefs and how they were impacted. Which is,
okay,
like,
cool.
The thing.
Alright,
we've gotten wildly off topic, just talking about...
We have gotten wildly off track, but it's fine. We're just having a fun time talking about stuff.
It's fine. It's a good time. Yes, it's a good time. It's loosely about comedians.
Yeah, loosely.
I would say a comedian who I really enjoy... who's from, like, I mentioned him earlier, but I find Pete Davidson to be very funny. He is definitely, like, more, I don't know, it's hard to say more crass, because a lot of comedians can be very crass, but he is, like, he's very good at what he does, and I've spent literal hours just, like, going through a bunch of his weekend updates, because I just enjoy his specific brand of comedy so much. And he does the same kind of, like, self-deprecating humor that I do, and I think that he does it so well. And I really enjoy his bit about Staten Island, just because it's like, yeah, that's very funny. And yeah, I really enjoy Pete Davidson as a comedian. I think that he's very good.
Yeah.
And because I didn't follow Ariana Grande, I didn't know about, like, that whole thing that happened until long after I started, like, listening, like...
Oh
it was,
God.
He made a joke about it, and then I looked up what happened, and I was like, oh. Completely flew over my head. I intersected him completely separately. Because I don't pay that much attention to Ariana Grande, I guess. I guess I can put that out there. She's fine. I don't have a problem with her, but I don't listen to her music.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I think I just know about random celebrity news because I just look at BuzzFeed. And that's how I find out about things. Yeah, like, I can recognize, I think, maybe 3 of the Kardashians by face now just because there have been so many articles about them. Don't know how the fuck Kourtney or Khloe fit into the picture, but I know 3! Woo!
Woo!
So I guess, like, another comedian that I really like is Bo Burnham.
He's very good.
Who is known, I think, for his brand of musical comedy, which is fun. Which, like, I didn't know a whole bunch about, like, as a genre, until my brother, who, by the way, like, saw me watching Bo Burnham and was like, this weird, because he's a 12-year-old who doesn't understand, like, how to meaningfully critique things in any way. He's just like, that's weird that he does songs and also does comedy. my brother found another musical comedian from, like, the 60s or 70s, that my dad recognized and was like, oh, Jesus Christ. But yeah, Bo Burnham does fun stuff. I think my particular favorite of his is Straight White Male, and or My Whole Family Thinks I'm Gay, because that was big relatable to me. Yeah, my coming out did not surprise, I think, anyone, barring maybe my father.
Very
But he
good.
doesn't notice much.
Yeah, no, I
so.
think that's fair. I think what I like about Bo Burnham is that he kind of straddles the line between, like, a stand-up comedian and then a musical comedian, because I don't listen to a whole lot of musical comedians, but I think I maybe know the most out of, like, anyone in our friend group, just because I recognized, and it was like we were doing something creative writing, and I knew, like, a musical comedian that no one else knew, and was like, this is a genre, and I was like, yeah, it's a whole genre. People are really into it. But Bo Burnham's really interesting because he does not fall in line with what I think a lot of people who are, like, musical comedians do, because he does the full shows, and they're not like concert. They feel very much like a stand-up special instead of a concert, the way I think a lot of musical comedians shows do. And then he also has very funny things that are not songs, but are, like, very much in line with his comedy, including, like, the Frog Book. He has this, like, storytelling thing that he does with the frog, which is very good. And then, I don't know what it's called, but it's the one where I don't remember what he's talking about, but he's essentially talking about how men demean and objectify women in order to hide the fact that they are hurt by female rejection. And so instead of meaningfully addressing their feelings, they lash out. And he has this, like, very funny poem he does to talk about that.
Oh,
but
yeah.
I think my two favorite Bo Burnham things are Left Brain, Right Brain. And then the country song, like, every country song, specifically the good girl in a straw hat with her arms out in a cornfield. That is a scarecrow. Which is...
Why is that on sync, but our intro isn't? Why could we both say that at the exact same time?
I mean, our brainwaves have now been synced up, you know?
Okay.
Also, it's like, everybody knows what's coming with that. I guess we should both know what's coming with 3, 2, 1, Hey Nerd.
It's not a surprise. We're not doing a new thing.
But I guess it's also that rhythmically I was following the rhythm of a song, whereas when we do it, we're just kind of shooting in the dark. And, like, maybe this'll happen. Maybe.
So we'll burn them. And, like, I think recently I've just kind of started leaning into more of, like, oh, I maybe do say funny things occasionally, and, like, that is a thing that I can do personally. Because I never really saw myself as doing that, because as a kid I historically had a bad track record with adults and sarcasm.
Like, adults getting your sarcasm, or getting adult sarcasm?
Getting adult sarcasm?
Okay.
Yeah, like, this is gonna shock and awe our listeners, but I was awkward as a kid.
Wow, I never would have guessed.
I was also very sensitive. So that meant...
bad news for our friendship, then.
So, like, sarcasm was kind of a mystery to me for a while. I was just kind of reflecting on an incident that I think maybe happened 10 years ago, which shows, like, just kind of how much it stuck in the old noggin. I was, like, offering to help clean up, like, paper, like, disposable plates at, like, a family friend's house. Keep in mind that these are disposable plates. That comes in handy later. And, like, one of these, like, family friends, like, handed a plate to me. And this guy was known to be kind of a jokester, and he was like, make sure you wash that off before you put it in the trash, okay? And then, like, monkey brain kind of took over, and I just did that, and, like...
I need to go check on a thing, so keep the audience entertained while I'm away, my friend.
Okay, I gotta fucking vamp now. Great. Cool. So yeah, what are other things that I, messed up doing as a kid? Well, I'm still pretty bad at recognizing, like, general verbal instructions. Oh, there goes Eli, out the door. What are they doing? Oh my god, I just saw their dog. Cool. Where was I? Oh yeah, following basic instructions is also difficult. Whether it's because ADHD makes following social cues difficult, or I'm just generally kind of stupid, is its own thing. But yeah, you can't give me... Oh no, Eli's back in the room, I gotta be quick. Yeah, so you can't really give me, like, specific verbal, like, you have to give me very specific verbal directions. If you just say, go get that box over there, and there's, like, anything else remotely cube-shaped in the room, I'm going to short-circuit. You do need to give me, like, color, dimensions, if possible, and approximate location in relation to, like, one of my appendages, like the blue, like, tiny, like, 6-inch by 6-inch box next to your right hand or something. That is what I can understand. If you tell me go get a box, I'm gonna freak out. So you're back. Was the thing checked on?
The thing was checked on. I didn't realize my father was home, so there, like, a phone was ringing in the background, and I was like, I should probably not just let that happen.
Okay. Cool.
There's also a dog right outside my door.
Yeah, I did see the dog.
Yes. He wants to come in, but he also is loud, so he can't do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, sarcasm as a kid, not great with. Good with puns, though. I was always pretty good with puns. Mainly because I stole my brother's Boys Life magazine as a kid and just read, like, the back of the section where all the, like, readers submitted jokes are, and then just kind of formulated my own thing from that. In 5th grade, we went to, like, how do I describe this? 1 day a week fake school for homeschooled children so that we socialized? It's a real thing.
Put together to make sure you got enough interaction with other people. That's wild.
Yeah. Uh-huh. It was, every Thursday for us. We had, like, I think 4 classes. And, like, for our English class, which I was pretty good at, 'cause
yeah, that tracks.
There'd be, like, a little riddle on the board from our teacher that we had to figure out, and I was always the first one to get it, mainly because the answers were pretty obvious, like, what do elf children learn in elf school? And I was like, if it's the fucking alphabet, I'm going to scream. And then people were like, how do you know that? I think the one that really freaked people out the most was when they're like, what gets wetter and wetter the more it dries? And I was like, a towel, after, like, 3 seconds. And the rest of my class freaked out, and from then on, I had to wait a good, like, 3 minutes so everyone else could catch up before I shared my answer.
Nice.
So yeah, propensity for puns, and other such riddles, stuff that I'm good at.
Yeah, I think for me, I was always, I don't know, I can never remember a time in my life where I was not sarcastic, and I think I was probably sarcastic before anyone explained to me what sarcasm was. That was, like, my natural, because I think that a lot of people evolve sarcasm as a defense mechanism, and I was an emotionally guarded child, which meant that I needed a defense mechanism, and so sarcasm. Yeah, I think that I was always, like, a very sarcastic person, and I just remember getting comments on it as young as 2nd grade by, like, people in my life who were like, they would call me, like, cheeky or, like, insubordinate or something, but it was really like, you're so sarcastic, but you're also, like, 7, so I feel like it's weird to call you sarcastic. But yeah, I think that I definitely had the reverse, where I was always very good with sarcasm and, like, picking up on sarcasm and when people were being facetious. And I think it's because I've always had a, like, sarcastic tone of voice that is very similar, if not the same, as my regular tone of voice. And so I got very good at picking up, like, other people's very slight tonal differentiations, and that's, like, the way that you tell sarcasm for a lot of people. But I could make puns. I was not great at, like, figuring out puns and riddles in that same way. I was good at figuring out riddles that were, like, Johnny walks 10 miles south, 10 miles west, 10 miles north, and ends up in the same place he started. How is this possible? Those were the kinds of riddles that I was very good at, like, solving.
Brain hurt. Oh, no.
Which are, the answer is he was at the North Pole. But,
Cop out.
So yeah, it would be things like that, but it was never, like, yeah, it was never, like, the pun riddles that I was very good at. It was always, like, the thinky, problem-solvey riddles.
Yeah.
But now I also very much enjoy puns.
Yeah. Yeah, because those are fun. And my mom keeps mistaking this, like, talent for, like, genuine, like, a sign of intelligent life. Like, there is
She mistakes my humor for...
Yeah. Like, madam, there is nothing upstairs except a monkey with a bunch of word blocks, smashing those word blocks together to figure out what sounds the same. That's what I'm working with mentally, okay? Like, that's not... I remember we were, like, packing up, we were packing up a bunch of stuff to go home from, like, Thanksgiving in Oklahoma, and there was, like, a bunch of, like, pies and stuff that we were taking home because we made too much food, and...
As you do.
Yeah, and my dad was like, okay, so we have to put the pies in last, and I was like, some might say that's a priority, and my mom heard that, held on to that, like, a thing that I genuinely had forgotten about by the time it was brought up again 2 weeks later with our other relative who's an ad exec, and she was like, oh, Caroline should go into advertising, she can make good jokes sometimes, and I'm like, how did you remember this, and also why did you think that that was a sign of, like, me being smart? That's not, it's not even that good of a joke. That is like, I make more dad jokes on average than my actual father is kind of where we're at currently, which is great.
Yeah, I use puns that I pick up or think of specifically to torture my father, because he hates them, and I enjoy the fact that he hates them.
Yeah.
Which is very good.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you have any recent examples?
I forget, I also just forget things as soon as I say them, so no, I don't, because I'm like, memory, who needs it? Who really needs to remember the things I say? Certainly not me. But it's like a lot of the time I say something and my grandmother laughs, and then I look at my dad and he's like rolling his eyes at me, and I was like, you don't appreciate me as much as this other person does.
Yeah.
Which is very funny.
Yeah, and it comes up great in, like, do your parents ever do, like, oh, it's the creative writing thing, like, oh, those verbal skills, or is my family just weird?
No, my family is never attributed to it being creative writing or, like, some special talent with the English language. They just think I'm dumb.
Mood!
Yeah, I don't think that they chalk it up to me being a creative writer or me being especially quick-witted. They're just like, yeah, you watch a lot of comedians because you don't have a social life. And I'm like, that's a fair assessment, Dad.
Yeah, I think the most recent one with me was, like, my dad was like, oh yeah, I have this friend and she built an aviary and attached it to her house, and I just went, one might even call it its own wing, which is a bird joke, shout out to Ileana, but yeah, and my parents, like, it takes my dad a minute to get it, and then once he does, he's like, oh-ho!
Ho-ho-ho!
Yeah, he kind of short circuits, and then my mom's just like, how do you do that? And I'm like, I'm not super smart. Again, monkey word blocks is where we're at with that. But yeah.
I mean, what is that quote? If you put a monkey and a typewriter together for long enough, it will eventually produce Shakespeare. Isn't that the quote?
Yeah, like, you put 500 monkeys at a bunch of typewriters and you let them write for 1,000 years, they'll eventually produce Hamlet. I think you can decrease those odds to about one monkey if you find one that knows English and has memorized Shakespeare.
Yeah. If you find one that can type word for word Shakespeare, then yes.
Find a well-read chimpanzee if you're so bothered about it.
Yes, speaking of funny animal things, and back to comedians a little bit, I saw a Shane Smith bit about, a Florida man, which is a great way to start any comedian's thing. But it was about a Florida man who robbed a Wendy's with an alligator, and it's this great, like, 10-minute thing where he's just talking about it, and I showed that to my parents, and they found it very funny. They were laughing a whole lot. Because it's, this guy's whole plan was, or what he did, I don't know if he had a plan, but essentially the point of this is, in a very funny way, the comedian explains, he threw an alligator, a small alligator, through the window of a Wendy's in order to convince them to give him money, but he only had the one alligator, and so once he had thrown it, he kind of had given up his leverage, and there was just an alligator loose in the Wendy's. And, you know, I feel like that's the most Florida statement that can be made, is that there's just an alligator loose in the Wendy's, and I don't know if everyone was nonchalant about that, but, you know, sometimes alligators just go places.
Gators happen, man.
Yep.
I think my favorite animal-related comedy bit was from a comedian, I'm gonna say Eliza Schlesinger? Whatever. Schlesinger, whatever. from her special Elder Millennial, when she talks about, like, when you get older, like, and you start thinking about, like, I want to have kids, or, like, I need to hold a baby right now. And then she's like, and what do you do, ladies? You look around your apartment, and who ends up being the baby? Your dog. And, like, you know, you pick up the dog and you start rocking it, and the dog's like, I fucking hate this! And that entire bit was very relatable to me, because I have a small dog, and now whenever my brother or I pick up our dog, sometimes we'll just, like, look at her and go, who's the baby? And she does kind of look at us with, like, a little bit of hatred flickering in her dim eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's great.
Pepper glares at me constantly, and I find it very funny.
Maybe that's just your dog's face.
Maybe. But Pepper does this thing where he won't look directly at you, he will side-eye you. Mm-hmm. And I don't know why, but he, like, every time I look at him, he's side-eyeing me, and I'm like, I know that you love me because, you know, you seek me out at all times of day, but why do you look at me like you're plotting my murder?
Mm-hmm. Aw. Yeah, Hildy just looks mournful whenever she, like, lies down. She just looks up at you. She's like, why am I placed on this earth? And she's just, like, on a blanket, like,
she's living an objectively good life, but she is still questioning it.
She just looks so forlorn. It's so sad.
Aw, good dog. Yes. Yeah, I was gonna say, in the same vein of, like, comedy, I think the comedy that I consume the most, and maybe this is showing my hand, but I watch I watch 2 political comedy shows, which are Last Week Tonight with John Oliver and Patriot Act with Hassan Minhaj. Mm-hmm. Both of which are very good, but which have, like, I would say that John Oliver and Patriot Act are the same show, but Patriot Act is more chaotic. Mm-hmm. Like, very similar shows. Patriot Act definitely has more chaotic energy, and I appreciate both of them so much. It's so good. I really enjoy watching them. Yeah. Yeah. Do you watch any political commentary? My
mother got into very political comedy, right around, 2016, for obvious reasons. Mm-hmm. And she watched a lot of Colbert, I think some Seth Meyers, but I really got into Last Week Tonight, and I binged Patriot Act some time ago. I'm not sure if I'm caught up yet, but yeah, just kind of, like, informative comedy that's, like, also just very dry and sarcastic is very fun. And just, like, it feels like a better way to get informed than just watching, like, Stephen Colbert make fun of a Trump tweet for 3 minutes.
Yeah. I never really got into, like, late night comedy, because it's, like, I'll watch occasional bits from, like, Jimmy Fallon or Seth Meyers, but that's normally, like, for the people they're interviewing, not necessarily for them. Yeah. I do remember that Mr. Bingham made us watch Stephen Colbert occasionally, like, just in his class. We'd show up and there'd be, like, Stephen Colbert on the board, and everyone accepted that this is what was happening. But I think I mostly, like, I watch John Oliver, because he covers a wide range of things, and also he's just, like, objectively a very funny person. Yeah. And then I specifically enjoy Patriot Act because, it's, like, the devoting the full time to, like, one specific topic, because that's not, like, John Oliver does devote, like, large stretches of time, but he also has, like, a show that covers multiple topics each week. And I really appreciate that Patriot Act is, like, we're focusing in on this one thing, and we're talking about it. And they had a really good one, and if you've binged it, you probably saw it, but there was a really good one about fentanyl and the drug crisis, which is, like, that's really good. And the Supreme episode is really good, because I never understood streetwear, and I still don't understand it, but, like, watching that episode specifically helped me kind of understand it, and then also went on to help me write my term paper about rich people and why they're objectively maybe not the best decision that this society has ever made. Because I was talking
about very, like, polite terms.
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe when we have our politics episode, we can get into how much I don't like rich people, but I don't know. I think, what was it? Eva kept calling my paper a manifesto, and I was happy with that. I think that that's a fair assessment of what I wrote. Yeah. Yeah. Eat the rich. Okay.
Good shit. Eat the goddamn rich.
Eat them.
Yeah. I think, like, I'm curious, from what I know, your family is a little bit into British humor. how much of that do you think you exposed growing up? And let's just kind of compare, like, just kind of what the fuck happened with us, because my parents were also into British, like, shows and whatnot, and I think that deeply affected me for the rest of my life.
So it's interesting because I think before I was, like, a person with opinions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which I would say probably happened somewhere between, like, 6th and 8th grade. Before that
so,
point...
while you were in middle school.
I developed a personality No, I had a personality before that, but, like, I think when I first began to, like... That's when I first began to consciously consume, like, media with the intention of studying it and, like, thinking critically about it. Because in elementary school, it's, like... I think in elementary school I did that with books, but it wasn't, like, with TV or movies until maybe middle school. But I would say, as a child, the only, like, British television I remember being put in front of me was Downton Abbey, and I avidly avoided Downton Abbey for a really long time. Like, I didn't want to watch it. I was like, these old rich people are British and boring, and I don't want to see it. I didn't really have a concept of, like, who the British were. I didn't get, like, I don't know.
You didn't like them.
I got historically what Britain was. I didn't really, like, I don't know. I was just like, Brits, whatever. I don't want to listen to this weird period drama. And now I watch a lot of, like, British murder mysteries, and I think that's, like, something, because, I think, yeah, I don't know why, and murder mysteries are weird, and I have, like, a weird relationship with them, especially right now, because, like, as much as a lot of murder mysteries are more focused on, like, non-police characters, they are still very much, like, kind of they're still police shows, and then it's, like, now that's the thing about conscious consumption, that, like, how much can and should I enjoy these shows, in light of what's going on right now, but, murder mysteries I think that's most of the British media I watch, but I can't really watch, like, things that are British humor. I never got into them. I'll watch it on occasion, or, like, my grandmother will watch it, and I will also be there, but I don't have, like, a specific draw to British humor. I think I'm a lot, like, I think my humor could be described as British just because it's dry and a little bit more subtle, but I think that's just me being a sarcastic bastard, and, like, has nothing to do with any British influence.
See, kind of opposite approach with me on Downton Abbey, because my parents always watched it, like, while it was on, which was, I think, it was on kind of late at night, at least for how old I was at the time. So I remember, like, going downstairs and, like, trying to stay up late enough to watch it. Mainly because aesthetic is pretty. It's a pretty British show. And, yeah, just kind of, like, getting involved with that. We also watched a lot of Wallace and Gromit growing up. And again, like, some Mr. Bean stuff. Like, while we were at friends' houses. So just, like, stuff that wasn't, I don't know, like, it's, like, these British, like, cultural, like, touchstones that we just kind of got exposed to, I think for no reason other than, like, I guess around that time period was when people were really into English stuff. I mean,
people continue to be really into English stuff.
Yeah. Like, because, you know, it was around, like, early 2010s was, like, when the royal wedding happened. The first royal wedding, I should say. Or, rather, William to Kate, because there have been other royal people have been getting married for a while.
Yeah,
it's kind of how
as long as they've had royal weddings.
Yeah, pretty much. So just getting into that, and, like, I don't know, I just think it's the stereotypical thing of, like, ooh, the accents. But also, like, British humor is, like, very self-deprecating in kind of a more subtle way that I think a lot of American humor is. And I think American humor tends to be a little bit more crass, or maybe there's just the cognitive dissonance of listening to someone with, like, a South London accent kind of just describe something incredibly vulgar. It's very funny to me.
Yeah, I would say that, like, definitely as far as British humor, I've since gotten into British comedians, and I did, to amend what I said, I did get very into Doctor Who, but I think, again, that's a show that I wasn't really thinking of as, like, a British show, because it doesn't focus a whole lot on, like, Britain itself. It's British actors playing, like, aliens.
Yeah.
Doesn't really have a whole lot to do with British society. So I think that was kind of, like, it's another one of those things where I was, like, I was consuming it, but I wasn't consuming it as, like, a piece of British media. I was consuming it because it was, like, I don't know, the Doctor was cool and he could do things that were cool.
Yeah. Yeah, but there's just, like, with British humor, I feel like there's more, like, littler moments that are just funny. I mean, just going back to Doctor Who, very first episode of the new series, I remember watching it, not really knowing what Doctor Who was at that point. Like, I returned to it later and then kind of recognized it as like, oh, it's that thing that I saw that one time. But at some point, like, the Ninth Doctor turns to Rose and goes like, hey, what's your name? And she's like, Rose. And he's like, lovely to meet you, Rose. Run for your life. And I was like, that's good. That's good shit. Good shit right there. And then also, lots of planets have a north, which is great. Because it implies that some don't, and I think that's really funny.
Some planets are unilateral, and there is no north or south.
Yeah. They ain't got magnets, man. No directions in space.
Yep. No, yeah. Doctor Who is very good. I guess, I don't know. Is Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, was he a British author? Because
I would be incredibly surprised if he wasn't.
Yes, that's also a very funny thing that came out of Britain. And again, like, you don't consume it as like a British piece of media because a lot of it's about like space. Most of it's about space. I think the Earth gets destroyed about 5 minutes into like the first book, and then they're just in space. But it's very good. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yes.
But yeah.
Yeah. Ooh, Mel Brooks. Batman. How many of his movies have you seen? Or do you, like, remember any particular ones that you would know as Mel Brooks? That guy makes good shit.
Let's see. I hear the name. Do I know who he is as a person? Probably not. I think I've seen I've heard of his movies, like, I'm looking into this. I've heard of Spaceballs, because everyone's heard of Spaceballs.
Good movie.
But I actually don't think I've seen any movies where I would be, like, recognizably that's Mel Brooks.
Not even Robin Hood Men in Tights?
No.
I think that was my first one that I watched when I was probably younger than I should have been. At the time, again, thanks to my babysitter Rachel, shout out. Being babysat by Rachel was just like, she just put something on the TV and we just watched it for 2 hours, and then 8:30 rolled around and we went to bed. But yeah, I think Robin Hood Men in Tights was probably one of my first Mel Brooks movies, and then from then on we moved on to, I think, Young Frankenstein, which I'm pretty sure is his, and Spaceballs, obviously. That's a very funny movie. Like, the intro alone, I mean, it's like these movies from that weird time where, like, the opening credits feel like you've accidentally gone to the end of the movie and you're watching the closing credits, because they just go on for so long. Like, it takes about 5 minutes, and, like, for Spaceballs, they're just, like, panning across this, like, gigantic spaceship as well, which is great. And I also recently watched Blazing Saddles, most of which I think aged pretty well. But, like, Mel Brooks is kind of, like, mile a minute, like, there's just constantly jokes going on, and, like, if you blink, you miss them. Like, if one doesn't land, that's fine, because there's another one ready to take its place, which is discussed by awesome video essayist Lindsay Ellis. But I watched Blazing Saddles because she referenced it, or she made a video about it, and I saw it, and there's this one moment that's great where it's just, like, this guy, there's a horse rampaging through town, like, there's chaos everywhere and destruction, and this guy kind of gets yoinked by this horse, like, he gets caught on the bridle somehow, and just dragged through the mud completely, and as he, like, gets dragged off in this chaotic scene, he's just like, well, there goes this suit. Just, like, very nonchalantly, which is just something I very much enjoy. So yeah, Mel Brooks' brand of comedy of just, like, kind of political humor and lampooning these, like, very famous, beloved tropes in movies is really great.
I think if we're talking about, like, very funny comedy movies, obviously an iconic one is going to be Monty Python and the Holy Grail, because I think even people who have never seen it or do not know who it is have definitely heard stuff from it, just because it's such, like, it's such a universalized piece of comedy.
If you've met a teenage boy, you know what Monty Python and the Holy Grail is basically kind of the thinking.
Yeah. Or you've at least heard a quote from it.
Yeah.
But it's like,
again, courtesy of teenage boys.
Yes, it is another one of those, it so effortlessly blends so many different types of comedy, because I think you have, like, the scene where they're making fun of the French, which is very good, and it's, like, either immediately preceded by or immediately followed by, maybe not immediately, but very closely preceded or followed by where they go to Camelot, and then there's like the whole dancing, singing little aside for Camelot. And it's very much like Monty Python. I think a lot of the movies are great, but that is one of like the most iconic pieces of media that they ever put out, just because it's so like varied in its humor. Yeah. And again, speaking of good British comedy, I guess.
Yeah, good British comedy. Kind of jumping off of that with John Cleese, Fawlty Towers was also like a formative piece of media that I saw, which is like just good. It's just John Cleese being like an incompetent manager of a hotel, for like just several episodes. I can't even remember how much of it we watched, but I just remember being really struck by like, you know, these British people just saying these things in like, number one, British accents sound more elevated because they're designed to be that way. But also just like listening to like the little observations and little like quiet self-deprecation that's like, in my opinion, kind of a departure from more brass like American humor, which is still like observational, but like, I don't know, it's not as kind of reserved. Just watching that was really funny. So yeah.
Yes.
It's cool.
It is cool. I think it's, yeah, I think it's also true that, like, if you look at, and I was watching videos about this, and it was about, specifically about Community and Arrested Development, both shows that I've watched, like, a couple episodes of, and have been, like, meaning to get into, and then my brain's just like, no. But they were talking about how both are very, like, they have that same sort of intelligent comedy, and you can see the way that they maybe got hurt for that, because they, like, the American sitcom industry doesn't really work for that same sort of, like, quiet, well thought out, intelligent comedy. Not to say that, like, that comedy's bad, or that the comedy that does work in America is bad, but it's just like these very calculated, spread out, kind of complicated pieces of comedy aren't received as well in the United States, which is why I think you see like that maybe British comedy can be a little bit more reserved, just because it's not playing in that same sort of like negative market as the United States is.
Yeah. I think another example of that would be the IT Crowd, which, barring the horrendous joke about trans people, is actually very good. Because it's just like a bunch of people, incompetent people, futzing about in an IT office, and like there's a vampire there who's just goth, and he's just there and kind of mopey a bit. And like everything that Moss says, because Moss is this very awkward character who's like, again, like stereotypical nerd as seen in like the early 2000s and 90s. And he's very incompetent with like physical things that are not related to tech. And at some point he just sets a whole bunch of stuff in his office on fire. And he kind of looks at it, and he tries to use the fire extinguisher, and because the fire extinguisher is made in Britain, it also bursts into flame. And he just kind of looks at it for a minute, and then he goes, I'm just going to put this over here with the other fire, and then just ignores it, and just proceeds with his day. Which is very good.
Yes. No, I do think that that's very funny. I've watched a couple episodes of the IT Crowd. I have a very hard time getting into sitcoms. And I've realized it's because, for some reason, situational humor does not make me laugh. It just makes me uncomfortable in a lot of cases. Because I can't deal with secondhand embarrassment, because brain get really uncomfortable. But then situational humor, a lot of the time I just like I can't do it. I don't know why. I don't know what about my brain was like, no.
Yeah. I found that I also have difficulty with that, and I think, as I mentioned before, insensitive. And so, like, a lot of situational comedy is putting people in awful situations where, like, they're gonna get hurt, and I personally can't deal with that, because I'm like, oh, but they don't deserve that, they're getting made fun of, and they're gonna be sad! Like, I have a hard time seeing people in distress as funny, which sounds probably a lot more, like, preachy than I mean that to be. As well as secondhand embarrassment. I straight up skip over several scenes in movies just because I'm like, I don't know if I can deal with this. This is awful.
Yeah, I think it's important to say, like, not to say that I think situational comedy is bad or that secondhand embarrassment is bad. I think it is, like, a good writing trope. It's just I personally can't. I can't.
There's a physical reaction that's just like, I don't want to do this. No.
Which is why I think I enjoy stand-up comedians so much, because it's always just someone narrating, right? Yeah. It's not like you're not physically in the moment and you're not watching it play out. You're just listening to someone talk about it, which is a lot easier, because it's like, I don't have to physically be here. Yeah. And if I want to emotionally check out from someone talking to me, I can do that. It's a lot easier than to emotionally check out from, like, watching something happen.
Yeah, and obviously there's, like, the old saying, like, comedy is just tragedy plus time, and so if someone's, like, chill enough to joke about something happening to them, it's probably, like, something they've recovered from, and I don't need to worry about the, like, immediate ramifications or dealing with any, like, serious heavy-duty empathy. Because it's just, they're just talking about some stupid shit they did when they were a teenager, which is relatable.
And I think it's also, like, I've heard I took, like, a class on storytelling, which had a little bit to do with stand-up comedy, but it was, like, the first rule of storytelling is never tell a story about something you're still in the middle of. And so I think that's, like, one of the reasons why comedy is so much easier to deal with is because it's never something that's, like, there in the middle of. It's either something that's going on in the world that we still might be in the middle of, but, like, you can remove, not, like, to say that you should remove yourself from it, but you are, like, at a distance, or you are at, like, some sort of, like, seismic difference that allows you to not be, super, like, emotionally embarrassed or invested, or it's something that's, like, they are clearly comfortable talking about, which is good.
Yeah. And then there's just, like, the comedy that I freaking despise, which is when people in a privileged group make fun of people in, like, another group that they're not part of. Which is, like...
the punching down?
Yeah, the punching down thing. That's no fun. That's no bueno. I was watching a comedy special on Netflix, and it was just one of those moments where I really hated that Netflix keeps things in your continue watching queue for, like, ages before getting rid of it. Because I was like, oh, this is a stand-up comedy special. This is nice. And then the comedian started mentioning, like, oh, you know, I had my son, but I can't call him my son because he hasn't picked his gender yet. And I was like, I'm gonna continue listening for the next 3 minutes and see if you can save this. She did not save it.
What was it?
She was just, like, made a bunch of jokes. She's like, I live in LA and, like, all the non-binary people aren't impressive anymore. And I was like, the fuck do you mean? She's like, the non-binary people we had growing up were, like, David Bowie and shit. And now they just bag your groceries at Whole Foods. I'm like, David Bowie ran so these guys could walk. Shut the fuck up. It just got real, like, transphobic real fast. It was, like, not a great time.
I don't know if you're comfortable saying the name of that. Will you at least text me so I know if that shows up to not watch it?
I think I vaguely Christina something, maybe?
Okay, cool. If you don't remember, that's fine. I was like, if you know who it is. Yeah, I do think...
It's like a comedy show, like, the title has, like, mother in it, because it's purportedly about motherhood, and then it just, like, devolves into a transphobic rant, like, 3 minutes in, and I was like, why are you... No.
Yeah, that is a thing. Speaking of transphobia,
Woo!
I discovered this through TikTok. As we've mentioned, I spend a lot of time watching TikToks. And, you know, there's the whole queer community on TikTok, which is, like, apparently a secret to some people, but, like, we're here and we're very loud, apparently. I say as someone who's never, had TikTok, I just watch video compilations.
Yep.
But there was this one that was someone who, like, showed an image of an article about Adam Driver calling out SNL for transphobic writing, in, like, a bit on SNL. And it was very cool because you know, they have their cut for time, which are, like, sketches that they wrote but then didn't happen because things ran long. And so he did this thing where he purposefully extended his, like, monologue in order to make sure that, like, this sketch that was transphobic got cut. Because it was, like, he was playing a woman, and he didn't explain what the sketch was, but he says, I'm playing a woman, and I can't tell if it's just outdated or transphobic, but either way, I don't want to put it on the screen. And I thought that was very cool, and, like, a very good way of calling out, like, I don't want to say quiet, because in a lot of cases it's not quiet, but, like, the transphobia that happens in a lot of comedy, because comedy has a lot of problems with, like, racism and sexism and transphobia and homophobia in general. It's, like, like any industry, of course, you're going to have those problems, but with, I think comedy is especially insidious because it's making a joke out of those things. Where I think, like, in dramas or in, like, shows in general, you can talk about, like, racism and sexism and take it very seriously, but a lot of comedy relies on making jokes out of things, which is not great if you're making, as you said, if you're making jokes out of, like, groups that you are not part of, or especially groups who are, like, you have privilege over or are part of a group that is traditionally the oppressors of. Yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah. And then that, like, bad comedy filters down to, you know, 14-year-old boys, and then you gotta deal with the fucking asshole teenager. which is not fun. Something I've been on the front lines of. Having brothers is great. I say that like I have more than one. I just have the one. It's enough.
The singular brother.
Yeah, just one singular brother. And it's like, there have been, like, videos on kind of how to break that, because a lot of that comedy does end up turning kids towards, like, the alt-right or just, like, extreme right stuff. Because, you know, making fun of minorities is, like, a hallmark of that.
And it normalizes making fun of minorities, which is not okay.
Yeah, and then it, like, oh, you're being sensitive if you call it out, and it's like, no. And a YouTuber that's done some really great work against that has been Natalie Wynn, aka ContraPoints, who, like, kind of meets them on their level and, like, does away with the, like, stereotype of the left is, like, very sensitive, like, elitist, kind of educated people, like, you know, yelling down from their pedestals, and instead is just like, motherfucker, racism isn't edgy or pushing a boundary. Like, if you genuinely think you're doing something new and innovative and cool by making fun of trans people, I have some news for you. Bigotry is, like, the oldest boundary there is. You're not pushing it, you're building on it. Like,
yes. But I think the important thing with that is to say, like, it's not to say that, like, you shouldn't be making jokes about being trans. It's just only trans people should be making jokes about being trans. Just, like, only black people should be making jokes about being black. If you're not black, you shouldn't be talking about that like you have any sort of expertise. But I say this to bring up two non-binary comedians who I really enjoy. Jess Tom, who talks about being non-binary and is very funny, but then specifically Rhea Butler, who has this really great bit, specifically are talking about how they explain their gender to people, and they say something along the lines of, realistically, I'm the and ladies and gentlemen because I like to feel like included even when I'm not. Which is very funny, and I'm like, that's me. They've explained the thing because that's where I fall too. It's very fun to hear the few non-binary voices in media talk about, like, make jokes about being non-binary, because it's not, like, a thing that a lot of people talk about.
Yeah. And that's something that Natalie Wynn also talks about, because she's a trans woman. And I think in the same video that I mentioned earlier, possibly a different one, I'll have to check. They're like hour-long videos each, so it'll take me a while. But she kind of talks about, like, there's this thing called the darkness, and it's basically, like, it's inside of, like, a bunch of people who are, like, from different oppressed groups. But, like, people who know and experience inside and out are really the only people qualified to talk about it. 'Cause she's like, yeah, being trans is kind of objectively, like, very, like, weird. Like, it's kind of a ridiculous thing, but it's not something you can really make fun of as ridiculous unless you have, like, that trans experience, TM, to, like, be fully qualified to talk about it, because, like, if you know all the ins and outs of something, you can explain something in greater detail, and I find that specificity, like, leads to better comedy. So yeah. Don't say jokes about groups you're not part of, please.
Yeah. And I think it's also, like, a very specific thing with that is, especially jokes that are making fun of things, just because one person of that group says that they find the joke funny doesn't mean that you should say it.
Yeah.
Because, like, I know this is a thing within the trans community that I've observed, is that there are certain trans people who will pander to cis people and say that things are okay that are not okay to the majority of the trans community, because we can talk about that if we ever have an episode on queerness, and I can talk about, like, this thing that I've observed. You
don't have to say if we have an episode on that.
Well, when it happens, we can talk about it, because it's a thing that I've observed that I don't want to get into detail here, because it's kind of, like, more heavy. But it is true that, like, oftentimes it is very easy to weaponize the voice of one person within a community against that community as a whole, and I think comedians especially should not be doing that, because just because one person finds the joke okay doesn't mean everyone finds the joke okay, and, like, if you cannot judge that accurately for yourself, you shouldn't be making that joke.
Yeah, and also, if you are not, like, if you enjoy watching comedians of a particular group and they make a certain joke, or, like, if someone from that group makes a joke and you're not part of that group, don't repeat the joke. Don't do that. Don't do that, sweetie, no. 'Cause, like, don't hijack that sense of humor. It's not for you. But yeah.
Yes.
This got heavy.
It did get heavy. I think comedy will always get heavy because comedy is inherently something that is, like, the most personal form of, like, expressing anything is comedy. I don't know what that was.
With tragedy, any bitch can cry, but
yeah,
what makes you laugh is a lot more personal. I think.
Yep, and I think also, like, the understanding of what makes you laugh. Because there are definitely, I don't know. I think it's very interesting thinking about also things that are inherently, like, I think it's also important to say, like, things can make you laugh without you having to fully understand them, because you can, like, laugh at a trans comedian's jokes about being trans or a queer comedian's jokes about being queer, and you're not bad if you laugh at that, even if you're not part of that group. It's just, like, don't use other people's experiences for your own gain, is I think, like, the line. You can enjoy other people's experiences, and you can enjoy the humor that people take out of their experiences, but if they're not your experiences, you shouldn't be monetizing or profiting off of them, or capitalizing off of them.
Yeah, don't exploit people who do funny things.
Don't exploit people in general, I think, is maybe the line we should take. Don't exploit people in
general, yeah. I mean, but as pertains to comedy, don't exploit people who do funny things.
Exploitation bad.
Donate to your local comedian's shelter.
Donate
Can't tell if that was a bad joke or just, like, something we should move on from, but,
I mean, the two things could very well be one and the same, my friend.
This is true. Let's move on.
Yes.
I guess, like, we've talked about, I think, pretty much everything we mentioned in the episode description.
I was gonna say another comedian that I really enjoy, off of a show I don't really watch, because I don't really watch The Daily Show, with Trevor Noah, but there are some very funny people on there who are correspondents, and one very funny person is Dulce Sloan. She is great. I love her. I love both, like, the segments she does on The Daily Show, but then also her stand-up comedy separately is very good. And I find, like, a lot of really talented people are correspondents on shows like The Daily Show, and I think, like, if you're looking to, like, support up-and-coming comedians, a good way is to take the names you see on those shows and then, like, look them up on YouTube and follow, like, the other stuff that they're doing. Because, like, a lot of young people may not have, like, their own specials yet, but they are doing things online and available elsewhere, and I think it's always good to be continuously, like, finding new people you think are funny.
Yeah. I actually ended up in orchestra seats for Trevor Noah's live show when he was in Houston a few years back, which was fun.
Ooh.
It was kind of on accident, because we had, like, family friends, and they're like, oh, we're out of these tickets, do either of you want to go? And my mom and I were like, fuck yes. And then we drove for, like, 2 hours to get to the place, because I think it was out in, like, Sugar Land or something. Crazy. But yeah, it was kind of fun, because, like, and it's a special that's now on Netflix, except, like, our night wasn't recorded, but it was kind of cool, because he, like, made references to Houston, because one of the bits is about tacos, and, like, that gets people from Texas excited. And, like, his warm-up, the guy who was, like, came out to, like, warm up the crowd before he went on, did, like, a little, like, audience participation thing where he's like, hey, if there are any married guys in here tonight, raise your hands. And we were with, like, a married couple, like, those were the friends who had, like, given us the tickets. And then I looked over at the husband, and the husband was like, I ain't doing shit. Like, he had this, like, his wife was like, no, come on, raise your hand. And he was like, I know exactly where this is going, so no. And then, like, you know, the other dudes in the audience with less sense raised their hands, and then the guy leaned into the mic and was like, ladies, that's the hand your husband masturbates with. And we were just like, oh, shit. Because I was like, this can't end well. I didn't predict it ending that way. But yeah, it was a fun little experience. My only live, like, experience with comedy. But yeah.
Yeah. Nice. No, I think, yeah. I've never seen a specifically comedy show live. I would really like to. But, you know, a lot of them happen in bars, and I am not unfortunately, I just happen to not be the kind of person who can get in there because of my age.
Yeah. One second, let me try to look up. I
don't know why I said it like that.
No, I don't want that. But there's this guy on YouTube that I really like, who posts all of his, like, full, like, specials on YouTube on his channel, and he is especially known for, like, recording every single one of his sets, because when people heckle him, he then responds in really, like, biting ways, and it's very funny to watch.
Well, you do that. I will say another person who is also a comedian and a YouTuber simultaneously is Curtis Connor. He doesn't have a lot of his stuff on YouTube, like a lot of his comedy on YouTube. He's just like a funny person who makes funny commentary videos. But I recently found a video of his about being a person who likes knives and the conflicts he gets in with people who like swords because of it. And I think it's just like, if you look up Curtis Connor knives, you'll find it. But it's very funny and I enjoyed watching it. And I don't think I'd ever seen one of his like stand-up things before. He makes like funny videos, so I've seen some of his comedy, but it was good and I enjoyed it quite a bit.
Yeah. The guy I was talking about is named Steve Hofstetter. He's good. So you should go watch his stuff. There's like hours of his content on YouTube. It's very funny.
Yes.
So yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's exhausted my list of stand-up comedians who I know. Aside from, like, the cast of SNL. Duh.
Yeah. I mean, I would say, like, the one more person is, just Josh Johnson does a lot of different stuff and is very varied, and I think he's very funny, but he has this one thing about getting fired from being in a gang because he was too positive. Like, I think one of the jokes is something along the lines of, like, why are you always smiling? And he says, we're in a gang, and none of us are in the hospital or dead. And it's just, like, the whole bit is very funny, but that sticks in my mind, and I think, like, he is one of the comedians who I definitely just watched, like, 1 5-minute thing of, and then suddenly it was 2 hours later, and I'd watched just a whole bunch of stuff from him. But he's very funny, and a very good comedian, and also he just has, like, I don't know, the cadence and the way he talks is very, like, unique, and I enjoy just listening to him because he has a very unique way of carrying himself. And similar to John Mulaney, I think they're both people who have, like, very unique ways of carrying themselves. Also, shout out Spider-Ham, John Mulaney, that character, and specifically the stuff he did that got cut because he forgot that it was supposed to be a PG movie. Yeah, the last thing I would ever describe John Mulaney's comedy is PG, because that man, a lot like us, maybe not super inappropriate in general, but, like, cursing, up to an 11. And so just listening to, like, some of the outtakes of him as Spider-Ham just cursing is very funny.
Yeah. I will also take this opportunity to recommend Upstanding Citizens Brigade Characters Welcome on YouTube, because it's, like, not just one person, it's a whole bunch of people, including Brendan Lee Mulligan, whose man...
Shout out Brendan Lee Mulligan.
Yeah. Both Eli and I adore. Brendan Lee Mulligan, please, come on our podcast. Please, we want you on our podcast. Brennan,
please,
come say hi. We want to talk to you. In, like, a not creepy way. We just want to say hi.
I feel like the way you make anything sound creepy is you say, I want to do this in a non-creepy way, and then it's like, well, obviously that's creepy.
But I guess, like, out of Brendan Lee Mulligan's bits, him reading the Declaration of Independence is fabulous, because he just does so many voices. It's great.
Yes.
But there are also, like, other people, and I'm trying really hard to remember the name of the guy who does the Little Mermaid if, like, the halves were reversed, if, like, it was a fish head on top of a human legs, because he's just, like, running around in a fish costume screaming at, like, random intervals during an instrumental version of the Part of Your World. And then he's also the same guy who does, like, a 13-year-old's monster under the bed, which is, like, everything that, like, a child is scared of, but also kind of made it horny, because 13.
So, like, Big Mouth. It's essentially just Big Mouth.
Yeah. And then, finally, he also did this really great bit, called Two Trench Coats Inside of a Kid. It's just the best thing. Like, every single, like, he's never offbeat with it. Like, he always, like, at the exact right time, like, goes in for the punchline. It's great. And, like, a lot of the women on there are great, too. There's this one that's, like, modern artist goes off on her audience, and it's just this, like, person, I can't tell if she's actually British in real life, but she does a very convincing British accent, and just like, says nonsense about, like, interpretive dance and, like, performance art and whatnot. It's great. So, yeah.
Yes. I was gonna say the reverse fish mermaid. reminded me of a very funny thing that happened at summer camp in the same, like, storytelling thing that I was taking. But we were discussing what a reverse... So the question was, would you rather be a reverse centaur or a reverse mermaid? Which got us to ask the question of how much... Because someone was like, oh, a reverse centaur is just BoJack Horseman. And I was like, no. A reverse centaur... And I'm very passionate about this. A reverse centaur is neck down of a human with the front legs and then head of a horse. Because a centaur is the neck down of a horse within the upper half of a person. And so I stand by the fact that a reverse centaur has to be the front half of a horse on the neck down of a person, which is objectively a horrifying thing to think about and makes me say no one should ever be a reverse that should not be your answer to that question, because you'd be a six-legged monstrosity. Yeah, so that's just a funny thing that I remember, is that I am very passionate about what reverse centaurs would look like now. Like, I became very passionate over the course of this debate, and I remain very passionate about it, because it's such a cursed thing, and I don't want anyone to not think of it as a cursed thing.
Okay, well, you completely disabused me of the notion that I should turn into a reverse centaur, which is a dream that, much like being a pope, I hadn't harbored until the moment you said that I couldn't be one, or shouldn't be one.
I'm saying that they are cursed entities, and they deserve to be treated as cursed entities.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I guess we can't really, do a podcast with us talking about humor, I guess without us talking about our own sense of humor while together, which I believe one or both of us has described as, just the Tumblr text post sense of humor.
Yes.
Yeah, just the shit we say to each other on a regular basis,
And the shit we text to each other. Because it's
not
just...
the shit that we text to each other. Yeah, once I write a draft out of that shit, once you give me the chance to, use some spell check, I look some, synonyms up, damn, I'm good. I'm all set.
It's very funny. Yes, I think it was one of my favorite examples of this is a long time ago, and I couldn't find it recently, I went looking for it, but it was our discussion of Hades and Persephone, and it was just I think it was something like, we were just talking about Hades being a soft boy, and I believe it was one of us who was like, I think what really happened is that Persephone stole Hades' dog, and then Hades burst out of the hell, who took my dog, and then immediately was flustered. Which evolved into a very good script on your part.
Yeah.
Yes.
I believe the reason you maybe couldn't find it is because you're looking in the wrong chat. I think that was in, just in a group chat. Because I was, frantically texting, wait, how do I retcon the myth of Hades and Persephone without, to make it not creepy? Because I was dead set on Hades not being a douche who, kidnaps people. Because he's not that way. We do need to do an episode on Greek mythology at some point, I think. Do you remember I texted you a joke about, why didn't Hades' poem get into, the Olympian Literary Review? And then I waited a beat, and I was like, because it didn't work with Demeter! Which is a classy poetry joke. And Eli looks like they want to die.
I do. Just
which is pretty much... Yeah, that's pretty much the consistent response to most of my jokes on Eli's part, by the way. Yeah, it's great. I can't even remember how that dynamic really developed, because,
Well, I think the first example I ever remember, and was it freshman year? It must have been freshman year. But it had to do with the same, Lord of the Rings thing. It was, you were talking about Lord of the Rings or something, just kind of to the group in general. And no one else understood it, but I was like, vibes though, and I started making fun of it with you. And I think it was at that moment that we realized, one, that we were very similar people, just in general. Over the course of freshman year, you kind of realize that you're very similar people. But it was also when we realized that we have that same sense of humor, and also that, for me especially, I'm not very good, I don't want to say I'm not very good at improv, but I'm only good at improv with specific people. I'm not, generally good at improv, and so I think it's, the magic of finding someone who, you have a good improv dynamic with.
Yeah.
And also have a similar sense of humor, which is just, obvious irony, sarcasm, just very, amorphous but very similar senses of humor, which is always good.
Yeah. Damn, I'm trying to remember what that joke was now, because I'm like, that sounds familiar, but I'm really having trouble placing it. Damn.
I think it was the I am the Moose King, king of all these Mises, I believe.
Was that the discussion?
I just don't remember when that happened, but I think that was one of our first discussions of Lord of the Rings, was we were just making fun of Thranduil. Because I think what had happened is I'd recently seen that Hobbit movie, because I watched the Lord of the Rings movies, and then I, like, waited a while to watch the Hobbit movies, because my dad was like, they're bad, and I said, okay, Dad, but then I eventually watched them. And I came in, and I was someone was making joke. You were talking about, like, Lord of the Rings, and then I said something along the lines of, I've recently watched The Hobbit, and Thranduil is ridiculous, and then we just kept making jokes about him.
That sounds familiar, yeah.
Yeah. Because he is ridiculous. He's objectively ridiculous, and I love him.
Oh my god, he's great. I mean, it's everything that really an elf king would be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think my favorite, like, result of that was just we discussed Elrond and Thranduil being the absolute PTA moms of Lord of the Rings.
Mm-hmm.
And then that developed into a whole conversation involving multiple parents from across Lord of the Rings. Which, looking back, I kind of realize is a little bit incorrect, because I think at one point we said that Galadriel doesn't have kids, which is a lie. She is a grandmother. Another fun fact.
She had kid, but kid is missing.
Yeah.
Somewhere.
Yeah, well, her kid's off in the Grey Havens, because here's the thing. I looked up where the fuck Arwen's mom is for most of this, and I figured, like, either dead or in the Grey Havens, because that's a cop-out. But no, Tolkien didn't just, like, be like, oh, well, I don't want to write in this character, so I'm just gonna, like, have her be dead or whatever. There's a backstory, because of fucking course there is. Of course. Tolkien has a backstory for a missing character that's not in anything. So, Celebrian, Arwen's mom, number one, Elrond saw her while she was visiting Rivendell, like, because she's, like, an elf noble or something, and he immediately fell in love with her, but did not tell her. The next fucking line on the wiki is, they married in the Third Age. I'm like, homie, you're skipping a beat. Because I'm no couples therapist. But you need to have the, hey, I really like you conversation before the, what table runners should we use at the reception conversation. Like, where is the excruciating confession from Elrond that he's, like, into this elf girl? Anyway, so they get married and have produced 3 children.
Mm-hmm.
And then she gets fucking kidnapped by orcs, tortured, and then, like, saved by her sons who bring her back to Elrond, who heals her, but she's still so traumatized by the orcs that she sails off to the Grey Havens anyway, and her sons spend the rest of their lives hunting down orcs as vengeance for their mother, and this is never brought up in the books. Like, there's a prequel movie within that, like,
I would love to watch them just hunt orcs and have that be a whole movie.
Yeah. So yeah, Lord of the Rings. Yeah, I really don't remember a lot of our earlier friendship, but I do just remember, like, I don't know, I feel like I saw you at some point and was just like, this person will probably know what I'm talking about if I talk about Lord of the Rings. It's an inevitability.
I exude that vibe.
Mm-hmm.
I also think it was true, and this is on me, this is a thing that happened, but I didn't spend a lot of, like, I went to Friday night writes and stuff, but I didn't spend a lot of time outside of class in creative writing. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people did that, where it was very much, like, unlike most people in creative writing, I didn't have any overlap with people from my middle school to people from my high school in that program. Mm-hmm. Because I think only a few other people had that. Mostly people, like, knew people from middle school who were now in creative writing in high school. And so, like, I spent a lot of time with, like, people I knew from middle school outside of class, because freshman year is terrible and everyone hates it. Mm-hmm. So I think, like, we probably didn't spend a whole lot of time at school out of class together, before the second semester of freshman year, just because that's when I gave up on eating with my middle school friends.
That's also kind of what happened with me. So if that's not, yeah, that's kind of both things that we both did. Again, shout out to Ileana for sitting with me for the first semester of freshman year for lunch. But yeah, eventually I was just kind of like, I want to go where it's closer to my classes now. So yeah. And then I guess sophomore year is when we started getting closer, and then, you know, we have this now.
Now we're here. Yeah. No, I think I think, like, all friendships evolve, but it was just, like, two people with very similar vibes who maybe didn't find each other right away, but eventually were like, friend.
Yeah, which is weird because we were very much in the same class for freshman year. We were in the same poetry workshop group, which is, like, really, in creative writing, the most intimate class you can get, because it's three people talking about feelings for an hour and a half.
And I think that definitely cemented, like, our early friendship, but also fully in that I forgot to tell people things that were very important for about 3 months. Which, you know, side effect of being...
Do you want to explain what the thing was, or shall I put you on blast for that?
I think it wasn't just one thing. I just forgot to come out in all respects, which was a real quality move on my part. I don't remember what the situation was that eventually forced it. I think I wrote a poem that, like, referenced...
Yeah, we were, like...
dysphoria?
Maybe. I think we were just generally talking about families, and, like, you said something about trying to explain concepts such as, like, gender identity and shit to your family. And that's when alarm bells kind of went off for me, and then I freaked out and went to the group chat on WhatsApp, which you weren't on, so I'm not sure. So I was like, wait, what are Eli's pronouns? And everyone was like, they, them. And I was like... I've been talking about feelings with this person for 3 months and been completely misgendering them. I had a small meltdown.
But it was also funny because I don't think I came out to any... I think... Yeah.
You didn't even fully come out in that conversation. You were just like, oh yeah, pansexual. And I was like, wait a minute. Because you're like, and I tried to explain, like, non-binary identity or something. And then I was like, wait a minute. So I guess, like, you came out to both me and Miguel in the same instance. Shout out to Miguel. But yeah, Eli didn't come out to me for 2-3 months after we met, which is something I've never let them live down.
Yes, but I think it's very important to mention that it's not that I didn't come out because of, like, fear, because of worry or anything. I just didn't come out because I was like, forgot. I forget to do important things sometimes. Which is very funny. It's a quality. It's an A move on my part. Woo. But no, I think we definitely, we developed a stage of emotional openness that first semester when we were like, these are my feelings. I feel them. And then we started hanging out more as friends second semester outside of, like, class dynamic stuff. And I think it was also just, like, that first semester, it was the integration of a lot of different, like, people in different friend groups together. Because I remember, like, I don't remember, like, for example, when Piper and I became friends, and we have very different accounts of, like, when we started liking each other as people before we were, like, I don't know. Piper thinks I didn't like her for part of freshman year, which I dispute, but I find that very funny. So yeah, it's like, I think that we had to develop a level of emotional openness just as people the first semester of freshman year, and then we became friends. And now I'm the person who Piper tells her inappropriate jokes to. And you and I have fun conversations, and we host a podcast. So friendship is real, guys.
The power of friendship. Woo! Woo! Yeah, I love it. Yeah, and I mean, like, I've told this story before to other people, but now that we're here, I'm just gonna, like, spill some tea. To the internet. Hello, internet. This is what I'm doing. So, I guess we're gonna talk about our friendship. I figure let me adjust there's things going on with my headset.
We'll probably have a longer episode about our friendship, because we're kind of drawing to the end of this time, but go ahead. Yeah.
Alright. So that will be an episode for another time, perhaps. Along with the, I think, 3 other episodes that we promised during the runtime of this one. Politics, queer shit, friendship.
I think maybe I was gonna say at some point, I feel like we should just have an episode talking about our childhood and, like, elementary school education. Because we had very different experiences with that. This is what I will say on that. My antipathy / confusion at rich people started very early, because I was a out of zone person at a very rich, in an elementary school in a very rich neighborhood. I lived 30 minutes away on the opposite side of the bayou. And so I had, like, a very weird, surrounded by rich people and not fully understanding them starting as early as elementary school, which is very funny.
Yeah, I live in an affluent neighborhood, and I also don't like the other people that I'm with here, so... yeah.
Well,
inside looking out, just being like, why the fuck are you like this?
Yes.
Yeah, because being homeschooled and surrounded by a bunch of private schoolers is a weird fucking feeling.
Yeah.
Like, I remember when I first started high school, like, one of the questions... Or, I think it was even sophomore year, one of the questions my brother got from the private school people in our neighborhood was like, so are you popular? And my brother was like, I have friends, but my school is 3,000 people strong, so not really much of a chance to get to, like, the top of the dog pile there. Because, like, it's just, popularity is not as big of a deal, I think, as, like, people make it out to be in movies and stuff. It's really, like, I can't think of a single time that, like, that kind of, such an obvious hierarchy has emerged, though maybe I'm just unobservant at our high school.
Well, I think at our high school, there isn't, like... I would say probably because of the way our high school is structured and this, like, breaking down into smaller groups, there's not... Like, social currency, I don't think matters as much as our high school as it might at, like, a stereotypical high school or as it appears to in movies. Just because, like, so much of your social circle and your social ability is already predetermined by, like, what art department you're in, that, like, general social currency kind of loses its efficacy.
The kingdom is too decentralized to have a single ruler.
Yes. We are a bunch of concurrent states that exist separately, but in the same general area. No, I think it's... Like, there are definitely people who are well-known, but it doesn't... Like, there's no kind of benefit associated with that. It's just, like, people recognize you.
Yeah, there's no, like, powerful clique that you have to join, so if they're... On the goddamn off chance that there are any middle schoolers for some reason listening to this, don't sweat it about high school cliques and shit. Just find your friends and stick with them and you'll be fine.
Yeah.
There's no, like, all-powerful clique that you can join that will be like, ooh, like, here's all the power in, like, social currency, and there's, like, nothing that will get you exiled to the, like, back of the lunchroom or wherever the fuck people get exiled to.
Yeah, or at least we have no experience with that, but we also go to a kind of weird high school.
We do go to a very quirky high school.
Yeah. I think one thing I've learned from listening to adults is that high school is going to kind of suck no matter, like, how well it goes for you. You're always going to look back at it and be like, that was not the best time in my life. And so I think, like, stand up for yourself, make sure that you're not getting, like, unfairly mistreated, but also it's okay to recognize the fact that, like, this doesn't matter as much as everyone makes it out to matter. And if high school, you just kind of keep your head down and stay quiet, you're not going to miss out on some momentous life event. You're just going to have kept your head down and stayed quiet for 4 years, and then you'll be in college, or you'll be in a job training or in a skill training profession, or you'll be in the workforce, and life will move on from high school.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel right now, but, like, about middle school, just kind of looking back and being like,
yeah,
I wasn't super traumatized, but also just generally a shitty time.
Yeah.
I don't think any of my friends now would have liked me much in middle school.
No,
I had friends.
I also think, like, if middle school sucks for everyone. I've said that before. I don't think middle school is good for anyone, and I think it's just figuring out how to deal with the way... Maybe we should just have a whole thing about school, but figuring out the way to deal with how it sucks for you. Because me specifically, I had to deal with a lot of, like, early bubbling misogyny in my middle school, because I went to a middle school that was, like, specifically known for and talked about as being, like, the place for the smart people to go. That was the thing with my middle school, which is already, like, inherently problematic, but it meant a lot of, like, specifically the guys there were very competitive, and from that competitiveness drew a large amount of misogyny. And so, like, I just had to deal with that, and it sucked, but now I'm here, and I'm at a less misogynistic high school.
Woo! One that is, I think, primarily girls.
Yeah.
Supposedly. Depending on, you know, gender identities and stuff. Yeah, I think, like, with me, it wasn't so much, like, friend group or, like, classmate stuff, so much as, like, psychotic teachers.
Definitely.
Math teachers kind of terrified me for a minute.
We just need to have a school episode.
Yeah.
I think what we're learning is we just need to have an episode about school and our experiences at school.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think on that note, having teased like a 5th episode topic, it may be time for By Nerd.
Yeah. Also, we should do an episode on Greek mythology. There's 6.
Yes.
All right. 3, 2, 1. By Nerd.
By Nerd. I think that was pretty good.
Okay.
All right. I'm ending now. Per Caroline's request, I am including this piece of political commentary from the man, the myth, the legend himself, my father.
So I find it amazing that the Republicans are so against homosexuality, yet Governor Abbott is in bed with Trump all the time.